Hi, my sweet friends, and welcome to Crochet Every Day with Judy. We are reading from Little Women, and we are starting with chapter 19, Amy's Will. While these things were happening at home, Amy was having hard times at Aunt March's. She felt her exile deeply, and for the first time in her life realized how much she was beloved and petted at home. Aunt March never petted anyone. She did not approve of it, but she meant to be kind, for the well-behaved little girl pleased her very much. And Aunt March had a soft place in her old heart for her nephew's children, though she didn't think proper to confess it. She really did her best to make Amy happy, but she worried Amy very much with her rules and orders, her prim ways, and long prosy talks. If it had not been for Laurie and old Esther the maid, she felt that she never could have got through that dreadful time. The parrot alone was enough to drive her distracted, for he soon felt that she did not admire him and revenged himself by being as mischievous as possible. He pulled her hair whenever she came near him, upset his bread and milk to plague her when she had newly cleaned his cage, made Mop bark by pecking at him while Madame dozed, called her names before company, and behaved in all respects like a reprehensible old bird. Then she could not endure the dog, a fat cross beast who snarled and yelped at her when she made his toilet, and who lay on his back with all his legs in the air, and a most idiotic expression of countenance when he wanted something to eat, which was about a dozen times a day. The cook was bad-tempered, the old coachman deaf, and Esther the only one who ever took any notice of the young lady. Esther was a Frenchwoman who had lived with Madame, as she called her mistress, for many years, and who rather tyrannized over the old lady, who could not get along without her. She took a fancy to Mademoiselle and amused her very much with odd stories of her life in France. She also allowed her to roam about the great house and examine the curious and pretty things stored away in the big wardrobes and the ancient chests, for Aunt March hoarded like a magpie. Amy's chief delight was an Indian cabinet full of queer drawers, little pigeonholes, and secret places in which were kept all sorts of ornaments, some precious, some merely curious, all more or less antique. To examine and arrange these things gave Amy great satisfaction, especially the jewel cases in which on velvet cushions reposed the ornaments which had adorned a belle 40 years ago. "I wish I knew where all these pretty things would go when Aunt March dies," she said as she shut the jewel cases one by one. "To you and your sisters, I know it. Madame confides in me. I witnessed her will, and it is to be so," whispered Esther, smiling. "How nice, but I wish she'd let us have them now. Procrastination is not agreeable," observed Amy. "It is too soon yet for the young ladies to wear these things. The first one who is affianced will have the pearls. Madame has said it. And I have a fancy that the little turquoise ring will be given to you when you go, for Madame approves your good behavior and charming manners." "Do you think so? Oh, I'll be a lamb if I can only have that lovely ring." And Amy tried on the blue ring with a delighted face and a firm resolve to earn it. In her first effort at being very, very good, she decided to make her will, as Aunt March had done, so that if she did fall ill and die, her possessions might be justly and generously divided. During one of her play hours, she wrote out the important document as well as she could, with some help from Esther as to certain legal terms. And when the good-natured Frenchwoman had signed her name, Amy felt relieved and laid it by to show Laurie, whom she wanted as a second witness. As it was a rainy day, she went upstairs to amuse herself in one of the large chambers and took Polly with her for company. In this room there was a wardrobe full of old-fashioned costumes with which Esther allowed her to play, and it was her favorite amusement to array herself in the faded brocades and parade up and down before the long mirror, making stately curtsies and sweeping her train about with a rustle which delighted her ears. So busy was she on this day that she did not hear Laurie's ring nor see his face peeping in at her as she gravely promenaded to and fro, flirting her fan and tossing her head, on which she wore a great pink turban, contrasting oddly with the blue brocade dress and yellow quilted petticoat. She was obliged to walk carefully, for she had on high-heeled shoes, and as Laurie told Joe afterward, it was a comical sight to see her mince along in her gay suit, with Polly sidling and bridling just behind her, imitating her as well as he could, and occasionally stopping to laugh or exclaim, "Ain't we fine? Get along, you fright! Hold your tongue! Kiss me, dear! Ha ha!" Having with difficulty restrained an explosion of merriment, lest it should offend her Majesty, Laurie tapped and was graciously received. "Sit down and rest while I put these things away. Then I want to consult you about a very serious matter," said Amy when she had shown her splendor and driven Polly into a corner. "That bird is the trial of my life," she continued, removing the pink mountain from her head while Laurie seated himself astride of a chair. Yesterday, when Aunt was asleep and I was trying to be as still as a mouse, Polly began to squall and flap about in his cage, so I went to let him out and found a big spider there. I poked it out and it ran under the bookcase. Polly marched straight after it, stooped down, and peeped under the bookcase, saying in his funny way, with a cock of his eye, "Come out and take a walk, my dear." I couldn't help laughing, which made Paul swear, and Aunt woke up and scolded us both. "Did the spider accept the old fellow's invitation?" asked Laurie, yawning. "Yes, out it came, and away ran Polly, frightened to death, and scrambled up on Aunt's chair, calling, 'Catch her, catch her, catch her,' as I chased the spider." "That's a lie! Oh, Lord!" cried the parrot, pecking at Laurie's toes. "I'd wring your neck if you were mine, you old torment," cried Laurie, shaking his fist at the bird, who put his head on one side and gravely croaked, "Alleluia! Bless your buttons, dear." "Now I'm ready," said Amy, shutting the wardrobe and taking a paper out of her pocket. "I want you to read that, please, and tell me if it is legal and right. I felt that I ought to do it, for life is uncertain, and I don't want any ill feeling over my tomb." Laurie bit his lips and, turning a little from the pensive speaker, read the following document with praiseworthy gravity, considering the spelling. "My last will and testament. I, Amy Curtis March, being in my sane mind, do give and bequeath all my earthly property, to wit, namely, to my father, my best pictures, sketches, maps, and works of art, including frames, also my $100 to do what he likes with. To my mother, all my clothes except the blue apron with pockets, also my likeness and my medal with much love. To my dear sister Margaret, I give my turquoise ring if I get it, also my green box with the doves on it, also my piece of real lace for her neck, and to my sketch of her as a memorial of her little girl. To Jo, I leave my breastpin, the one mended with sealing wax, also my bronze inkstand. She lost the cover. And my most precious plaster rabbit, because I am sorry I burned up her story. To Beth, if she lives after me, I give my dolls and the little bureau, my fan, my linen collars, and my new slippers, if she can wear them, being thin when she gets well. And I herewith also leave her my regret that I ever made fun of old Joanna. To my friend and neighbor Theodore Lawrence, I bequeath my paper mache portfolio, my clay model of a horse, though he didn't say it hadn't any neck. Also, in return for his great kindness in the hour of affliction of any one of my artistic works he likes, Notre Dame is the best. To our venerable benefactor, Mr. Lawrence, I leave my purple box with the looking-glass in the cover, which will be nice for his pens and remind him of the departed girl who thanks him for his favors to her family, especially Beth. I wish my favorite playmate, Kitty Bryant, to have the blue silk apron and my gold bead ring with a kiss. To Hannah, I give the bandbox she wanted and all the patchwork I leave, hoping she will remember me when you see it. And now, having disposed of my most valuable property, I hope all will be satisfied and not blame the dead. I forgive everyone and trust we may all meet when the trump shall sound. Amen. To this will and testament, I set my hand and seal on this 20th day of November, Anni Domini, 1861. Amy Curtis March. Witnesses, Estelle Valnor, Theodore Lawrence. The last name was written in pencil, and Amy explained that he was to rewrite it in ink and seal it up for her properly. "What put it into your head? Did anyone tell you about Beth's giving away her things?" asked Laurie soberly. "What about Beth?" "I'm sorry I spoke, but as I did, I'll tell you. She felt so ill one day that she told Jo she wanted to give her piano to Meg, her cats to you, and the poor old doll to Jo, who would love it for her sake. She was sorry she had so little to give, and left locks of hair to the rest of us and her best love to Grandpa. She never thought of a will." Amy's face was full of trouble. "Don't people put sort of postscripts to their wills sometimes?" "Yes, codicils, they call them." "Put one in mine, then, that I wish all my curls cut off and given around to my friends. I forgot it, but I want it done, though it will spoil my looks." Laurie did it, smiling at Amy's last and greatest sacrifice. Chapter 20, Confidential. I don't think I have any words in which to tell the meeting of the mother and daughters. Such hours are beautiful to live, but very hard to describe. So I will leave it to the imagination of my readers, merely saying that the house was full of genuine happiness. Hannah had dished up an astonishing breakfast for the traveler, finding it impossible to vent her excitement in any other way, and Meg and Joe fed their mother like dutiful young storks while they listened to her whispered account of Father's state, Mr. Brooks' promise to stay and nurse him, and the unspeakable comfort Laurie's hopeful face had given her when she arrived worn out with fatigue, anxiety, and cold. What a strange yet pleasant day that was, so brilliant and gay without, for all the world seemed abroad to welcome the first snow. So quiet and reposeful within, for everyone slept, spent with watching, and a Sabbath stillness reigned through the house, while nodding Hannah mounted guard at the door. With a blissful sense of burdens lifted off, Meg and Joe closed their weary eyes and lay at rest, like storm-beaten boats safe at anchor in a quiet harbor. Mrs. March would not leave Beth's side, but rested in the big chair, waking often to look at, touch, and brood over her child, like a miser over some recovered treasure. Laurie, meanwhile, posted off to comfort Amy, and told his story so well that Aunt March actually sniffed herself, and never once said, "I told you so." Amy dried her tears quickly, calmly restrained her impatience to see her mother, and never even thought of the turquoise ring when the old lady heartily agreed in Laurie's opinion that she behaved like a capital little woman. Even Polly seemed impressed, for he called her "good girl," blessed her buttons, and begged her to "come and take a walk, dear," in his most affable tone. She would very gladly have gone out to enjoy the bright wintry weather, but discovering that Laurie was dropping with sleep in spite of manful efforts to conceal the fact, she persuaded him to rest on the sofa while she wrote a note to her mother. When she returned, he was stretched out with both arms under his head, sound asleep. Aunt March had pulled down the curtains and sat doing nothing in an unusual fit of benignity. After a while, they began to think he was not going to wake till night, and I'm not sure that he would had he not been effectually roused by Amy's cry of joy at sight of her mother. There probably were a good many happy little girls in and about the city that day, but it is my private opinion that Amy was the happiest of all when she sat in her mother's lap and told her trials, receiving consolation and compensation in the shape of approving smiles and fond caresses. Mrs. March saw something on the lifted hand that made her smile. She said nothing, but Amy understood the look, and after a minute's pause she added gravely, "I wanted to speak to you about this, but I forgot it. Aunt gave me the ring today. She called me to her and kissed me and put it on my finger and said I was a credit to her, and she'd like to keep me always. She gave me that funny guard to keep the turquoise on, as it's too big. I'd like to wear them, Mother. Can I?" "They're very pretty, but I think you're rather too young for such ornaments, Amy," said Mrs. March, looking at the plump little hand with the band of sky-blue stones on the forefinger, and the quaint guard formed of two tiny golden hands clasped together. "I'll try not to be vain," said Amy. "I don't think I like it only because it's so pretty. I want to wear it as the girl in the story wore her bracelet, to remind me of something." "Do you mean Aunt March?" asked her mother, laughing. "No, to remind me not to be selfish." Amy looked so earnest and sincere about it that her mother stopped laughing and listened respectfully to the little plan. "I've thought a great deal lately about my bundle of naughties, and being selfish is the largest one in it, so I'm going to try hard to cure it if I can. Beth isn't selfish, and that's the reason everyone loves her and feels so bad at the thought of losing her. People wouldn't feel half so bad about me if I was sick, and I don't deserve to have them. But I'd like to be loved and missed by a great many friends, so I'm going to try and be like Beth all I can. I'm apt to forget my resolutions, but if I had something always about me to remind me, I guess I should do better. May I try this way?" "Yes, wear your ring, dear, and do your best." That evening, while Meg was writing to her father to report the traveler's safe arrival, Joe slipped upstairs into Beth's room and, finding her mother in her usual place, stood a minute, twisting her fingers in her hair with a worried gesture and an undecided look. "What is it, dearie?" asked Mrs. March. "I want to tell you something, Mother." "About Meg?" "How quickly you guessed. Yes, it's about her, and though it's a little thing, it fidgets me." "Beth is asleep. Speak low and tell me all about it." "Last summer, Meg left a pair of gloves over at the Lawrences, and only one was returned. We forgot all about it till Teddy told me that Mr. Brooke had it. He kept it in his waistcoat pocket, and once it fell out, and Teddy joked him about it, and Mr. Brooke owned that he liked Meg, but didn't dare say so. She was so young and he so poor. Now, isn't it a dreadful state of things?" "Do you think Meg cares for him?" "Mercy me, I don't know anything about love and such nonsense," cried Joe, with a funny mixture of interest and contempt. In novels, the girls show it by starting and blushing, fainting away, growing thin, and acting like fools. Now, Meg does not do anything of the sort. She eats and drinks and sleeps like a sensible creature. She looks straight in my face when I talk about that man, and only blushes a little bit when Teddy jokes about lovers." "Then you fancy that Meg is not interested in John?" "Who?" cried Joe, staring. "Mr. Brooke. I call him John now. We fell into the way of doing so at the hospital, and he likes it." "Oh, dear, I know you'll take his part. He's been good to Father, and you won't send him away, but let Meg marry him if she wants to." And Joe pulled her hair again with a wrathful tweak. "My dear, don't get angry about it, and I will tell you how it happened. John went with me at Mr. Lawrence's request and was so devoted to poor Father that we couldn't help getting fond of him. He was perfectly open and honorable about Meg, for he told us he loved her, but would earn a comfortable home before he asked her to marry him. He only wanted our leave to love her and work for her, and the right to make her love him if he could. He is a truly excellent young man, and we could not refuse to listen to him, but I will not consent to Meg's engaging herself so young." "Of course not. It would be idiotic. I just wish I could marry Meg myself and keep her safe in the family." This odd arrangement made Mrs. March smile, but she said gravely, "Joe, I confide in you, and don't wish you to say anything to Meg yet. When John comes back and I see them together, I can judge better of her feelings toward him." "She'll see his in those handsome eyes that she talks about, and then it will be all up with her. She's got such a soft heart it will melt like butter in the sun if anyone looks sentimentally at her. She read the short reports he sent more than she did your letters, and likes brown eyes, and doesn't think John an ugly name, and she'll go and fall in love, and there's an end of peace and fun and cozy times together. Oh, dear me, why weren't we all boys? Then there wouldn't be any bother." Mrs. March sighed, and Joe looked up with an air of relief. "You don't like it, Mother? I'm glad of it. Let's send him about his business and not tell Meg a word of it, but all be happy together as we always have been." "I did wrong to sigh, Joe. It is natural and right you should all go to homes of your own in time. But I am sorry that this happened so soon, for Meg is only 17. Your father and I have agreed that she shall not bind herself in any way, nor be married before 20. If she and John love one another, they can wait and test their love by doing so." "I'm disappointed about Meg, for I'd planned to have her marry Teddy by and by. Wouldn't it be nice?" asked Joe. "I'm afraid Laurie is hardly grown up enough for Meg, and altogether too much of a weathercock just now for anyone to depend on. Don't make plans, Joe, but let time and their own hearts mate your friends." "Well, I won't, but I hate to see things going all crisscross and getting snarled up. I wish wearing flat irons on our heads would keep us from growing up, but buds will be roses and kittens cats. More's the pity." "What's that about flat irons and cats?" asked Meg as she crept into the room with the finished letter in her hand. "Only one of my stupid speeches. I'm going to bed. Come, Peggy," said Joe, unfolding herself like an animated puzzle. "Quite right and beautifully written. Please add that I send my love to John," said Mrs. March as she glanced over the letter and gave it back. "Do you call him John?" asked Meg, smiling. "Yes, he has been like a son to us, and we are very fond of him," replied Mrs. March, returning the look with a keen one. "I'm glad of that. He is so lonely. Good night, Mother dear. It is so inexpressibly comfortable to have you here," was Meg's quiet answer. The kiss her mother gave her was a very tender one, and as she went away, Mrs. March said, with a mixture of satisfaction and regret, "She does not love John yet, but will soon learn to." We'll stop there and start next time with Chapter 21. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.